Hey, hi, my name is Manraj, and today I'm talking about gun control, everyone's favorite subject. In the past several years, there have been numerous occasions of mass shootings and killings. To name three of them, Virginia Tech, a lot of people know about that one. Isla Vista ones, those are the UCSB killer, and Sandy Hook, where all the children had died. AmericanGunFacts.com has reported that there are 270 million guns in America. That's about 85 guns per 100 people. Today I'm talking about how that stricter gun control laws will help reduce violence in America. So my first claim is that there will be lower gun-related deaths if there are less guns. My second claim is that violent crime would decrease if there are also fewer guns. My third one is stricter laws will help reduce, make it harder for people to buy guns because the current laws are inefficient. So my first claim is that lower gun-related deaths in America would happen if there were less amounts of guns. So the CDC reports that there are about 11,068 firearm homicides every single year. The Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act, which was enacted in 1994 by Bill Clinton, instituted federal background checks on anyone that's buying guns publicly. The JAMA Network of Internal Medicine Study, their journal was called Gun Law versus Gun Fatalities in 2013, found that states with stricter gun control laws had fewer deaths, compared to states with more lax control gun laws had more deaths. The Violence Policy Center pulled stats from the FBI. This quote is from them. In 2010, across the nation, there were only 230 justifiable deaths in America from private citizens, and this was reported to the FBI. That same year, there were also 8,275 criminal homicides with guns. That's a very big difference in the number. According to the Journal of Firearm Availability and Homicide, authored by Lisa M. Hepburn, individuals in households with guns in the home appear at markedly higher risk for homicide victimization, especially from family, intimates, or acquaintances. That means if you have a gun in your home, you are at a higher risk of getting hurt with that gun, as opposed to someone who doesn't have a gun in that home. More guns would mean that criminals are more likely to have a hold of these guns, which means that if they were in a situation, they can turn the situation very lethal. Which moves me to my next point. Violent crimes would decrease if there are fewer guns. If guns make us safe, then why aren't we the safest country in the world? We have the most guns. Around 414,000 non-fatal firearm incidents happened in 2011, according to the U.S. Department of Justice. The Johns Hopkins Journal had a study on Missouri's repeal of the permit to purchase law, which is Missouri tried to enact a law that meant that you needed to go through a very rigorous background check, even if you were buying the gun from a private seller. So this is a quote from the study. This study provides compelling evidence that the repeal of Missouri's permit to purchase handgun licensing laws, which required all handgun purchasers to pass a background check, even for purchasing from private sellers, contributed to a sharp increase in Missouri's homicide rate. The Johns Hopkins Hospital found that if this law was enacted, there would be 55 to about 63 less homicides every single year. But since the law was repealed, the homicide rate went up with firearms. And this brings us to my last point, which is strict laws will make it harder for people to buy guns because the current laws are inefficient. Mentally ill people, like the shooters of all three of those mass murders, Virginia Tech, which was Sung Cho, he made an account that he was going to kill himself before he actually did, telling his roommates that. The UCSB killer, Elliot Rodger, claimed the day that he did kill people, the day of retribution, and he is going to slay on that day. And Adam Lanza, the shooter of the Sandy Hook Elementary School, went to Yale's Child Study Center as a child and was prescribed antidepressants. Paul Helm, president of Washington, D.C.-based Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence, said if gun sellers start doing background checks, this would make it harder for prohibited purchasers to get guns. Mayors Against Illegal Guns, a group of mayors who oppose illegal guns in their cities, had a study, and this is a quote from the study: millions of records identifying seriously mentally ill people and drug abusers as prohibited gun purchasers are still missing from the federal background check database because of lax reporting by state agencies. Since data and records do not make it to the federal level, especially mental health records, with new gun policies in place, it would be harder for people who cannot buy guns, so they cannot buy guns. So this brings us to the conclusion that having stricter laws will reduce violence in America because there would be lower gun-related deaths if there were less guns. Violence crimes would decrease if there were fewer guns, and strict laws will make it harder for people to get guns because the current laws are inefficient. Thank you.
Right, well, you identify the proposition. I think it's a little bit broad because we don't really know exactly what you mean by stricter gun control laws. At one point, it sounds like you were talking about the background checks issue, but at another point, it sounds like you're talking about restricting the number of guns that people are allowed to own. You're kind of conflating the two things there, and I think that that's a little bit problematic. You need to focus on the claim a little bit more. I thought the secondary claims were pretty clearly labeled, and it sounds to me like you've got an interesting argument here about the reliability or the appropriateness of the existing laws, because we do have background checks. You cite the law that was passed in 1984, and then there's a question about whether or not it works, and to me that seems to be like on the third point, the issue that you are developing here, that there are loopholes, there's a lack of data being made available for people to check backgrounds, and so that there are flaws that are going on there that suggest that there are people who shouldn't be. I don't think anybody wants crazy people to have guns. Nobody thinks that that's a good idea. Even the NRA doesn't say, well, mentally insane people should have a right to own a gun. So the real question is, why is this a problem? And I think if you develop the argument a little bit more about the problem with the Brady laws or the lack of data that's available on these background checks, that you'd have a clearer argument as to what it is that you're saying on this particular point. I thought that you cited all your information pretty effectively, and it's delivered very nicely, so it's easy to understand what it is you're saying about each of those individual points. Like I said, to me, the strongest argument was that one about the problem with the background laws or the background checks. The John Hopkins study, for instance, that's the one that gave you, I thought, the most effective data, and that was about changing the way the background checks worked. And we could use a little bit more data on that. Also, I think you need to have a direct quote there. It sounded like you're paraphrasing on that, and it would be better to have the direct quote. All right, thank you. Alex Salinas.